Hello, this is Raul Ramirez of the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you wrestle better so that together we can keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for watching or listening. So we're available. We should be available on all kinds of. Actually, this this would bring us to today's like topic because I got an email, I think just because we've been putting out podcasts for a little while, then you start getting emails from very different people who want you to use their service. And one was about some podcast app, and then they said that on Apple and Spotify, we're like the number one podcast for wrestling strategy. So right, so I guess if you do like a search, and I didn't check it out. I didn't see if it was true or not, but they said we're number one. We're the number one podcast for wrestling strategy. So I thought, why don't we talk about wrestling strategy? Because we've been talking about all kinds of different things recently. So and it's totally fine because we don't have to talk about the same thing every time. But yeah, with regards to wrestling strategy, there's so many things you can talk about. um, what I wanted to try to do is I made a list of different aspects. So hopefully some of these different aspects might resonate with you and might be able to help you in your upcoming match. And I think since this is like catch wrestling, so definitely apply, of course, to catch wrestling, but also those of you who are doing like no-gi, it should really also apply to you. So I wouldn't necessarily consider it as applicable to. Well, I guess it could be applicable to like amateur wrestling, like the high school and college stuff, or even freestyle. But I'd say like especially since freestyle has a lot of rules, a lot more points, and all that stuff, it might apply less. So Nogi tends to be a little more free. I know a lot of different style. They're like IBJJF or all these different organizations have a bunch of different kinds of points and stuff. But I think because you have submissions and all that, then this might be more applicable to those of you who do Nogi as well. So feel free to comment if you're watching live. If you have any questions, so you can kind of shape the conversation a little bit. But I'll go ahead and get started anyway. Actually, let's go and do the announcements real quick. So before we get started, you can always train with us in Los Angeles, Fight Science MMA every Thursday night at 8:30. Also, if you have access to the gym at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, right now we're on spring break, but we're gonna get started again just in like a couple weeks, towards the beginning of April. So if you have access or if you know how to get access, you can totally be there because we have many classes offered throughout the weeks. And so also, if you're nowhere around and you want to just support us, you can always become a member of our YouTube channel. Also, if you want to support us and you just like you don't want to become like a online uh, CWA member, then we always have a bunch of different uh like one-off courses. So one of the ones I think is also really valuable would be the Pressure Pass Volume 2. It's like the latest one we put out. I use this stuff all the time, especially in Nogi, because they're going to be facing you like someone who does jujitsu. So this I think it's really applicable for Nogi. um, so that one's on our website. Also, yeah, if you want to become like an online student, then great. We have on our website the CWA Academy. So yeah, I think those are all the different things. Also, we have a link if you have something to teach online and you want like an all-in-one website platform. It's Kajabi, and we have like a 30-day trial link down in the show notes. So you can try that at I believe it's it should be free trial for a month. Check it out. Okay, with that being said, let's go and get to the different things. So I think one, like the first one I think we can start with is one that my good buddy John Strickland on the East Coast says. He's the head coach of American Hook Wrestling, so the real like authentic lineage of American catch wrestling. So John Strickland, one of the things he often says is, you want to wrestle a grappler and submit a wrestler. So what does that mean, right? So so especially like those of you who are doing catch wrestling, you're learning a lot of like the real, or you should be learning a lot of real what we call mat wrestling. So all these different escapes if you're underneath, like all the different, like in judo, I think they call it newaza, like all the ground fighting stuff. You really should be focusing on all that stuff. And actually, there was I wish I would have like cut it out, but there was a really, I think, really popular like amateur wrestling coach online that he did a post a few weeks ago about like the most important thing in wrestling is the mat wrestling. So um, I tend to agree with that. Right? So you want to be really sharp with your mat wrestling. But with that being said, if you're a really good catch wrestler, you might not be the best at doing takedowns, which is not a problem in catch wrestling because there's no points. But in amateur wrestling, getting taken down, you'll lose points, right? So being the person who gets the takedown, you get points. So an amateur wrestler might be really good at getting takedowns. So you like, why are you gonna like fight someone who's really strong at something? Uh, just either you dive with we call it like a leg dive, just like dive in, you know, get the mat to the, or get the fight to the mat where you can actually beat them. You should have a strong chance of beating them, and especially with the submission hold. Right? And we've seen that. If you follow Flow Grappling, I mean they've paid like some of the best American like amateur wrestlers to do a submission grappling match, and like they've all gotten submitted like right away. So so there's a lot of evidence supporting that you want to submit a wrestler, and then you want to wrestle a grappler. So you want to be using, and actually, and now I think that they've, like a lot of these famous coaches have caught on, like with Danaher and Greg Souders, right, who's really pioneering the ecological way of instruction. They're using this terminology, pins, right? They're saying pins, right, a lot, and actually they are kind of starting to say like, I think Danaher a few years ago was saying something along the lines of like, you definitely want to try to like pin the person down so that you can move around and set up your submission hold. Souter says virtually the same thing, and setting up your guard passing game by thinking about pinning them. That's the way you want to wrestle a grappler, right? So you can be on top and really try to minimize their ability to move, and then you can pass the guard or set up your submissions. So that's the wrestler grappler part, right? So definitely something to think about. Oh, there's someone. Just want to shout out to the chat. There's someone commenting in Korean, and so yeah, if it can be translated, that'd be great. But yeah, you said good. I'll see if I can put it up on my phone so I can see the, because right here all I can see is the Korean. Let's see if the live chat can translate it. Nah. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't let me. I'm sorry. It doesn't let me translate. Like it doesn't auto translate it for you. So if you can put it into Google Translate and then copy and paste your question into the chat, then I'll be able to read it. Because we're, as of right now, I guess the live chat, oftentimes Google will translate it, but I guess like say like if you comment from another country or another language, like on our regular videos, then like Google often gives you the option, or gives me the option to translate those comments. And so I guess maybe later on those will be translated. All right, Hans. Hello from Calgary. All right. All right. Well, hello from Los Angeles. It feels cold here, but I'm sure it's not as cold as Canada. But yeah, we're getting out of winter. The sun's starting to shine. Right. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue because actually I have a few different things. I want to bring out something from Farmer Burns, something he wrote about. So um, yeah. So okay, so then another thing that it's kind of unrelated to this. So one thing that I think you want to think about that I've always been inspired by is something that Billy Riley said. And so Billy Riley, if you don't know who he is the famous coach of a lot of these like really popular like catch wrestlers, like say like Billy Robinson and uh, Carl Gotch. So he's not related to actual Frank Gotch, right? But Carl, and then also Roy Wood, who's currently the successor of Billy Riley. So he took over Billy Riley's gym and runs the Snake Pit in Wigan. So this is the Billy Riley I'm talking about. And so he said something kind of paraphrasing, right? So he said like especially in a match, uh, if you're in a match and you feel like, oh, I think I can do a move, I can totally do this technique. Usually, it's too late to do that technique, right? So the person will probably move out of the way, so you can't do the move. So most of it is like say like don't overthink it, but also what does that mean? Like if you like, it also could mean you haven't really learned the technique so well so that you're not really able to use it in a match. So I guess maybe unlike the ecological way or whatever, it's like so you got to practice it. And actually, this kind of comes up with Farmer Burns. So I think this is a good way to segue into what Farmer Burns is saying. So let me go ahead and show you. So people who are watching the video, you can see this very old book. So the life work of Farmer Burns. Right. So it's very old, it's falling apart, but one of the chapters here is his what he calls his theory of time. So it's a really short chapter, chapter 8. And so what he says basically is like he spent all his life working on the farms, and as he grew up, he always dreamed of being the champion wrestler, and he would grapple and do wrestling matches, but he felt like he was a little too clumsy, when he was a boy or growing up. Um, but he kind of developed his system, right? And it's really kind of similar to it's reflected in the Billy Riley quote. So maybe I'll try to read a little bit of this chapter because it's really short. Um, so he said he said by regular habits and constant practice, he could develop a mental organism that would materially aid him in winning for himself and winning for himself the coveted goal of champion wrestler of the world. Right. So developing regular habits. So he kind of also so well with he'll kind of take this into like different aspects, to like eating right, taking care of your body. But with regards to wrestling, it kind of goes as follows. So I'll keep reading. I think the next two paragraphs kind of cover it. He believes that the brain, with its telegraph system of nerves, should be the director of every move, and that by practice, you can leave the transmitting of the message to that center of the brain called instinct, which is cultivated by experience. Right. So I think it kind of means like drilling or just a lot of practice, a lot of sparring. So things become kind of automatic. So when it feels right that you can do a certain technique, then you do it. Don't think about it. Like, don't, like, if you're recognizing that you can do something, usually that time has passed. Okay, okay, so here comes the next paragraph. His object, of course, was to instinctively protect himself from any chance advantage gained by his opponent while allowing his conscious mental faculties to search for the opponent's weak points. And, and again, when the weak point was discovered, to make quicker time in reaching that spot. This is what he calls his theory of time. He was on time, and his opponent, who worked only with his physical powers, was behind time because he was forced to be on the protective instead of the aggressive. He was always too late. So hopefully that kind of gives you the idea or the understanding where you and you can kind of like interpret it any way you wish, but this is kind of the idea. It's like you really want to be doing the drills or learning or sparring, trying to implement these different techniques into your sparring so that you can remember how it feels when the time is right to do the technique. And actually, usually that's the terminology that I use with my students, where um, like if they're doing something correctly, if they're doing a technique correctly, and a lot of my students like at UCLA, they tend to be more beginners. So as they're like learning and moving, and say if they get a takedown really good, and then I tell them remember how that felt, all right, because a lot of times like your eyes are only in your head, so you can't see from the outside like that you're in a good position to do the move. You can only feel it with your body. So same thing like how Farmer Burns mentions, like the whole telegraph system. So you want to kind of get those techniques and the understanding of the techniques and the feelings of when you can do the different techniques embedded in your brain, so that when that happens, then you can move instinctually. So that's what he says. You put it in there so much, right? And so that you can put all those things into the instinct part of your brain. And he says that instinct part of your brain is cultivated by experience, right? So that you can leave a lot of the rest of your brain to be thinking about gaining the advantage over the other person, or basically trying to find their weak spot. So that's what Farmer Burns like discusses, or that's what he calls his theory of time, right? So that you can be basically on the offensive, and they're just defending themselves, even if they're really strong or really good. If you can find that weak spot, or if you basically embodied a lot of the techniques, that you don't have to be thinking too hard about defending yourself, that you can take advantage of the person. Yeah. So let's kind of give like maybe even a framework of like how you can be training, right? So one thing you can be doing to try to help you to uh, like it was not necessarily like drilling. It's kind of the thing is like say in order for you to do like what I described, it's like you probably have to have some techniques. So if say if you only know a double leg takedown and you're with your training partner, only do the double leg takedown, but your training partner, you can start off standing, and then your partner can give you a little bit of resistance so that you can find different ways to enter that technique, get the person down, and then follow them down to pin, right? So you have to find a way to pin them. So you can start trying to utilize your Nelsons, your different types of ways to turn someone over, or if you make them fall back onto their back, you stay close to them so that you don't allow them to roll back over. So you can go back and forth, and then as you both progress, you can give more and more resistance, so that you can kind of get this almost like a flow where it's like you start from standing, you go down, then you pin them, right? And then you can start seeing different ways. Like say that if you spar with someone who does jujitsu, then their chances are if they want to stand with you, then if they go down, a lot of times they're going to be facing you. So you can kind of be used to these different positions, right? So you can also try to flatten them, get them onto their back. Basically, you pin them, right? So chances are when you're pinning them, then you're accidentally passing their guard. So it's one way to kind of think about like where if you want to be training or not necessarily like drilling, but kind of doing a flow where you are doing something realistic and actually gaining some experience of someone who's resisting you a little bit, and you can kind of find different ways to pin them, and you'll find different. With that being said, then when you spar other people or compete, uh, they won't necessarily be surprising you with like crazy techniques because you would have understood the principles involved in like pinning them and stuff. So that's you can be like free in that way, but you do want to understand some techniques. So like you say, like how I mentioned earlier, like the Nelsons or different takedowns. Um, but also, like I said, even earlier with the mat wrestling stuff, you really want to be understanding that. So that is the most important, especially if you get taken down or you feel so confident in your mat wrestling that you're like, whatever, I'm not even going to try to take you down. I'm just going to shoot in, and and you expect them to like sprawl on you because you'll end up on top or you'll end up reversing them somehow. So this, of course, all takes time. You're not just gonna learn it in one weekend or whatever. It takes time and practice. That's exactly what like Farmer Burns is saying. It's and also too like Billy Riley as well, right? So all these things do take time. So like don't beat yourself up if you just started, or even if you're a couple years in and people are still like manhandling you. Like don't worry about it. Even with Billy Riley too, is like supposedly the way they trained was like if you went to the gym, they wouldn't really talk to you much, but if you stayed right and you kept sparring and you got beat up all the time, eventually they kind of accepted you, and then they started training you and kind of showing you like, oh, if you're in this position, why don't you try this move instead? And like so then that's kind of how they started teaching a lot of people, especially in Wigan. um, and I think that's kind of similar where in the United States too, where also too they wouldn't necessarily take in any random person in many scenarios. Many wrestlers they in their gyms they kind of had some trusted people, and so maybe even like the wrestling wasn't as systematic as what you might see in like a big time jiu-jitsu, like a Gracie Baja or something like that. They seem very organized and orderly, like with their curriculum and the way things are taught and stuff like that. So wrestling seemed to be a lot different. All right, so let me see what else I got here. Yeah, I think these are kind of like some of the main things. Other things would kind of be like um, you start going into like mindset and like psychological stuff. We've been kind of talking about that recently, and actually I got some really good printouts that I want to do in a different podcast. I mentioned that one book. It's called Winning the Inside Game. It is by Steve Magnus. So he is actually a running coach, but he's written several kind of like sports psychology books. And I finished that book already, and he gives different like PDF downloads and stuff. And there's one that I want to talk about next time. But so it's kind of a little bit of a different subject. So this is just kind of like different strategies that you can use with regards to training, right? And even competing, right? So using your training so that it's very applicable to when you are competing, and then you can really up your success rate. But with that being said, too, you also got to make sure that you're fit enough. So there's so many different layers, right? So we just mentioned the mental stuff, but then also the fitness. So you got to get that cardio up. You got to be doing outside work besides the training in the gym. And I personally believe that when you're in like the wrestling class, you should be doing wrestling. You should be doing the learning different techniques, or sparring, all that stuff, and then save the strength and conditioning stuff for another time. Right? You can do it after if you want, or whatever, but let's just concentrate on acquiring wrestling knowledge, right? While you're in the wrestling class. That's my perspective. I'm not big into doing like a huge warm up. Usually, our warm up is actually takedowns and what I just described. Like you take the person down, you follow them, and then you get them to pin, right? So you pin them. They're not going to be resisting as much because it's just a warm up, but you basically would have done tons of reps of all kinds of takedowns. You basically do, and you just start thinking of different creative ways to enter the moves, and your partner can resist you all kinds of ways. So that's our warm up. Um, then also we do like say like you might start on your back, face up. The person's on top of you. Then you got to try to find your way out, and they'll still resist you, but not like too much. You got to or even sometimes you'll start in referees or like defensive position. So you're what like in turtle, right? And the way jujitsu people call it. Um, if someone's on your back, you gotta get out, right? So you can start all those like situational sparring scenarios. So you can get a lot of experience using the techniques, right? So using the mat wrestling techniques and putting them into practice so that when the match comes, it would be something new, right? So there's so many aspects, so many layers that go into like winning, right? Like so you're not just acquiring techniques, you have to put them into practice. And then there's the whole strength conditioning aspect. And then on top of that is the mental aspect, which, a lot of times people call that like the most important aspect because yeah, they say like there are a lot of people who might be really great, like they're super good in the gym, but then they never compete, or if they compete, then they just lose all the time. So we've seen that a lot in MMA, but you see it in all competitive sports. So that's what I'm saying. So there's so many different layers, and I think the subject or like the focus of today's podcast will be just some strategies like what we mentioned with Billy Riley, and also Farmer Burns, and also my good buddy John Strickland. Where you wrestle a grappler, submit a wrestler. So I think those are like the main things. And then I think next week we can do one based off of that book, the Winning the Inside Game, because there's a lot of great aspects that Steve brings up in his book, and in particular, there's a couple chapters that I definitely want you to like be exposed to or to learn about, and I'd like to share with you. So definitely going to do that. All right. So, um, oh yeah, let's get to some of the comments. Okay. So, hello, hello from Los Angeles. Great to hear from Korea. All right. So, Hans, Mushin in Japanese martial arts, no mind. Yeah. So, um, yeah. So it's kind of like, yeah, moving on instinct. Yeah. It's like, what's Hans? What's that treasure you're holding? I think you're referring to this. So, I was lucky enough to be gifted this. So this is a very old, it's called The Life Work of Farmer Burns. It's a very old book. It was get like I read it so much that it's all falling apart. And I think, no, it's just because it's very old. Let me see what the publication date is. It's probably not as it's probably not ancient because when Farmer Burns was like later in Farmer Burns' life. Oh, 1911. Copyright 1911. So this book is Probably pretty old. Okay, so Mike Hunt, or they get knocked out in the street. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So actually, yeah, I was actually talking about this the other night. I think there was some statistics saying where it's like people who do like any kind of sport, like any kind of combat sport, as opposed to people who randomly do like some self-defense classes. So you get these two groups, right? People who've done some self-defense classes, and then people who regularly train in combat sports. Like it's kind of obvious, but it's like I guess they found that people who are training in regularly in combat sports fare better, like in a street fight or if they get attacked or in self-defense situations. So it's one thing to think about where it's not necessarily like, and I think what I don't remember exactly now, but I think one of the things that the article was trying to say is that like these people, even though like a combat sport might not be the same exact scenario where they got attacked, but because in their classes they're often, or they're, if they're sparring and stuff like that, so they're always getting put under pressure, so they react better under the pressure of a self-defense situation. So as opposed to someone who has been under pressure in a self-defense class maybe once or twice, and they think that, oh, I now I know what to do. um, I guess that article showed that, yeah, you got to be regularly putting yourself under pressure, and I think that's kind of like you don't have to put yourself under like so much pressure where you're just in fight or flight or you're just scared and stuff. Just like, the pressure from sparring in classes was shown to be really good. All right, Mike Hunt. Karate Kid, learn to fight so you don't have to fight. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that was one of the things too. It's like I think there was another thing. I think it was like some documentary or something where they did research on people who were in prison for like they were mugging people, right? So people who like are who made a living off of stealing from others, actually going up to another person and stealing their wallet and all their valuables and stuff. And I think one of the things that they said was that they're always looking for the victim. So they kind of could tell who would be like the easiest target, right? And it's not always like the really tiny person. So, like I think it also shows where it's like if you're training, right, if you kind of give the idea where you know what you're doing, you can handle yourself, you give off a different vibe, and so then those who like people who are used to like stealing from others, robbing others, or whatever, they can pick up on that. Right. So they can kind of tell, like by a glance, but I think ultimately, I think you kind of they can detect that vibe where it's like the trained person vibe, and then they're just gonna avoid you. Yeah, that's funny. Mike Hunt, uh, ever play wrestle someone and they bite you? Amateurs do stuff you don't expect. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, yeah, a lot of freedom there, especially in I guess like in the street fight as well. But yeah, even the play fighting, you never know what to expect, right? But the thing is, just as long as you don't, like, if it is like a self defense scenario, that was that other thing where it's like our brains are kind of used to patterns, and so if everything's going kind of like as usual in your day, and then all of a sudden you get attacked, then a lot of people freeze, right? Because your brain actually has to take some time to process, like something out of the ordinary is happening, so you have to like kind of shift over, like, or your brain's kind of like, what's going on? It has to take some time to figure it out. But the more time you spend like training, supposedly like the amount of time you spend like a deer in the headlight decreases, so you can better react, right? So they say, everyone still kind of has a little bit of that, but the more you train, the less time you spend like a deer. So Mike Hunt, are you related to Mark Hunt? Mhm. Let's see if you're still watching. All right. So feel free to ask any questions right now while we're still live. But yeah, so some of the things kind of went over, just kind of to recap, is the whole idea. If if you're up against so if you're a catch wrestler, right, and you're up against someone who's like an amateur wrestler, focus on submitting them. Also, if you're a catch wrestler and you're going up against someone who's like jujitsu oriented, focus on pinning them so that you can pass their guard, and maybe you can set up your submission, your of your own, right? All right, Mike Hunt. Musashi said, "The way you train is the way you fight. Tournament wrestling was way faster than in the gym. I didn't expect that." Oh, actually, good observation or a good comment there, because um yeah, that's definitely what I've seen a lot, where it's like sometimes you'll have gyms where it's I guess maybe you wouldn't consider it competition gyms, I guess, like stuff just where you learn the art and stuff. So they might not spar as hard, and you don't always want to be sparring too hard where you can like increase injury, but definitely if you want to be competing, you have to know that like you both signed up to like just beat the other person, and sometimes some people are going to be actually everyone's going to be very aggressive. Um so I'm glad you brought that up, because people have to know that, especially if they're beginners and they're kind of just wading into competition. I've seen that where plenty of like say white belts, and they just get trounced because they don't know like that people are going to be coming after them even at the white belt level. So um, so that's why you want to get what that cardio going. You want to be training and pretty intense. Not you don't have to go for really hurting the other person. So everything can be done in a safe way, but you do have to have some intensity there. So, but yeah, sometimes I guess you kind of have to experience that. So maybe like people who are beginners and you're just getting into competing, you, like don't be scared, right? But yeah, just expect them to really bring it, right? So they they want to win, and of course you want to win. So some people are going to be trying very hard. So, you gotta kind of expect that, right? They're gonna and if it's your same weight division, they might not be as strong as some of the like the heavier weights or whatever, but they're still gonna be coming at you with their full force, right? Of a body that's similar size to you, and uh, they're gonna try to win. They're gonna try to beat you. So I wouldn't say you have to like train 100% every time, because also too, if you're training 100% every time, then you can't really acquire a lot of new techniques. So uh, actually, this is one of the things. So I train a lot, or I take a lot of classes with Eddie Bravo, and yeah, one of the things he said, yeah, is like so say if you're an advanced person, then you should always try to expand what you're learning or what you know. So an advanced person will know a lot to it, and they'll probably be able to win a lot of matches. But if they choose to keep learning, you're probably going to have to drill some new techniques, and then you kind of have to spam it. So you're going to fail at it a lot in sparring, but you just keep doing it, and then it will get in there. So um, a lot of times if you can't really be sparring at 100%, like where you're just like in survival mode, right? So in order to I would say like in order to acquire new techniques and stuff, maybe you're not going to be sparring crazy hard, right? So but that's up to you and your training partner. But yeah, don't kill yourself. Like, huh, the women tend to go hard too. They zip around fast. Yeah, yeah, definitely. You see some of the actually usually like say during the Olympics and the Olympic freestyle on our channel, I usually post like the women's matches because they tend to be some of the like most exciting, or at least most technical matches. Um, they use a wider variety of techniques. You see what Helen Maruli's using all these cool trips, and then was it Amit Elor using different like hand fighting stuff, and but oftentimes the men are mostly using the double leg. But actually, that was a Spencer Lee match for the gold medal. That was pretty awesome. Like that was very high paced and very technical, especially on behalf of the Japanese wrestler. I think that was Ono. Um, hopefully, oh no, it wasn't. He just competed against Ono, I think. But anyway, go check it out. It was oh Higuchi. So that match really technical, so good, and I think that's yeah, I think it becomes where it's like you get two really high level guys that are not only trying to double leg each other all the time. Then it gets more interesting, and so personally, like that's why I like watching a lot of the women's matches is because they're not just trying to double leg each other all the time. Like oh, you saw a lot of the in the women's matches like suplexes and counter suplexes. There was one I forgot the Japanese woman's name, but in the final, I believe it was the gold medal match where um, I think it was a European woman got double underhooks on the Japanese woman, and then the Japanese woman like got double overhooks and then suplexed the other girl. It was so cool, so awesome. So these are the things that I'm kind of like more familiar with catch wrestling, because catch wrestling, I guess in a way, has like more of that free thinking style where you're finding all these different types of counters, two common techniques that people want. So I really appreciate it when people are doing all kinds of different things in their matches. So that's why I tend to like watch a lot of the women's matches, because a lot of times, yeah, the guys might be using a lot of strength and just resisting, right? So yeah. So, but yeah, going back to your comment, Mike. Yeah, people if they want to be competing, yeah, you might want to up the intensity of the sparring, so that you can get so what some people say it's like so that the training can be more difficult than the competition, so that the you don't gas yourself out while you're competing. Yeah. Yeah. So also too, actually one of the announcements that I forgot to make is so we're probably gonna be doing more catch wrestling matches. So those will be up for free on our YouTube channel. So uh, we'll probably be doing some pretty soon. And yeah, they'll be free for you to watch. So it'll be authentic catch wrestling, so no points. You win by pin or submission. If someone goes the full time, so we'll probably just do 10-minute rounds. But if someone goes the full time without a pin or submission, then the most aggressive wrestler. So basically, the one who's better at the mat wrestling, so who can stay on top, ride the other person better. They will be the winner. So that's catch wrestling in a nutshell. If you see something where the people are adding points or allowing people to stay in guard and all that, it's really getting to jujitsu territory there. Uh, but yeah, so hopefully what I just said is very easy to understand. Win by pin or submission, and you got to know how to mat wrestle. All right. The other thing too, if you want to support us, you can support us through our YouTube channel. Just like if you don't want to become a student, right? So if you're not in LA, you can join our online academy. If you're on the East Coast, you can train with John Strickland, American Hook Wrestling in South Carolina. Also, too, we have one-off courses on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. So I just really want to thank everyone for listening, because ultimately we want to help you to wrestle better, and together we can keep real wrestling alive. See you next time.